there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be making a smoke grinder. Now a smoke grinder is basically just a novelty toy that you can put together using up some scrap material. And you all know how much I love using up scrap material. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to the to the wood rack, see what's available, and then I'll meet you back at the bench with the stock that we need. Well, the first thing that we're going to need is a base for the project, and for that I've got this scrap piece of pine, and I'm going to cut it to a dimension of 4 1/8 by 4 1/8. It's 3/4 of an inch thick, but if you have thicker, that's fine too. Now at this point, we're just going to do a little bit of marking out, and you only need to do it on one side because the sides are identical shaped. We're actually only marking it out so that we can do table saw and router table setup. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mark the center, and we know that it's 4 1/8, which will make us at 2 1/16 will be our center. We also need to get a router depth or a groove routed in this that is going to be 1/2 of an inch deep. So we can also mark that. Now, the groove that we need to cut here at the widest section is going to be 5/8 of an inch wide. And we're going to be using a 14-degree dovetail bit to do some cutting of it. So what we're going to do is center our 5/8 here on this mark that we just put at 1/2 an inch, and we're going to draw our 14-degree lines up to the top of our board. And with that, you should have something marked out that looks like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the table saw. We're going to set the tilt of our blade to this angle right here. And once we do that, we're just going to nibble away the majority of the material in here just to give the router bit a bit of a break. It's a tough route to go through all of that stock, and we just want to take off the minimum amount. So we're going to head over to the table saw and basically chip away most of this center. Well, the blade of the table saw is set at 14 degrees, and I've got it set for a height of 7/16. Now you can see here that I have the fence set up so that we're going to cut just to the inside of this these marks that we've made here on our smoke grinder. But what we should be able to do, because the piece is all symmetrical, is rotate it on each edge, and it should give us the outside cuts for each of our grooves that we need in this piece. So let me just demonstrate the cutting, and then we can go from there. Now that we have all of those cut, you can see that we have our groove lined up there in the middle. We're just going to shift our fence just a little bit more, and we're going to take off a little more of this material. And we'll continue this until the majority of the material has been removed from the center of this block. one more adjustment of our blade here will give us some nice clearance, just like that. And we'll run it through 4 more times to finish clearing it out. And now basically over here at the router table that we have the majority of the material chipped out with the table saw, it should be a fairly easy pass with the router bit. What we've done is I've set the height at 1/2 inch. If you remember, we cut this to 7/16. So this will finish it off just nicely and give us the width that we want. And we're going to do it on all 4 sides, just in case we're off a little bit, so that it makes the whole piece symmetrical. Well, now that we've finished making the base with its slot here on each side, what we need to make is the sliders that go in between here. And we're going to be making those out of a scrap piece of walnut that I found on the rack. Now, the height of these has to be about 1/16 of an inch above the surface of the pine here that we have for the base. So we know that this is 1/2 inch deep. We add a 1/16 on top. We know that we need a piece that is 9/16 high to clear this pine. So we've set our table saw blade up for our 14-degree bevel here, and we're gonna cut our sliders and test them in our slots. And there we have our slider cut, and you can see that it slides through both pieces just fine. And what we need to do now is cut 2 pieces of this, 2 1/4 of an inch long each. The next step that you now have your sliders made is we're going to drill a 1/8 inch diameter hole right in the middle of this. So center it this way, and we're going to drill it 1/2 inch deep. The next piece that you're going to need is for the crank, and for that I've got a scrap piece of maple, and what I've cut it to is 1/4 inch thick, it's 1/2 inch wide, and it's 4 3/4 of an inch long. Now we're going to need a few 1/8 of an inch holes in this, and we will do 1 hole on each end, 1/4 of an inch in and centered on the 1/2 inch. Another on this side, 1/4 inch in, centered on the 1/2 inch, and then 1 in the middle, right here. So 4 3/4 divided by 2 is 2 3/8. So 1 at 2 3/8 in the middle, 1 1/4 inch in, and 1 1/4 inch in. All 3 of them 1/8 diameter through holes. So as well as drilling the holes where I said, I've also rounded off both of the ends using a 1/2 inch circle template to mark it, and then just a belt sander to sand the profile. And I've given it a good sanding to make it feel good and take those sharp corners off of this. Well, now there's one more piece to do, and that is some retaining caps. And for that, we're going to need some pieces of 3/8 diameter dowel. Now these two pieces of 3/8 dowel are actually 1/4 inch long, and we will be drilling a 1/8 inch hole about halfway down through the middle of these pieces. And one of the last things that you want to do for the preparation before we get into the assembly is on one of these end holes, take your pick, countersink it for a wood screw. Well, it's time to start the assembly, and hopefully you can hear me over Buddy 2 doors down, who's got his chainsaw going for the past hour and a half. Nobody cleared it with me if it was okay to run a chainsaw during filming day. But anyway, we're going to start the assembly here. We have a couple pieces of 1/8 inch dowel, and the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be inserting them into our glides and gluing them in place. Now you want to make sure that you clean up all the squeeze out when you glue this in here. So let's get those glued in. Well, this next step is optional. You can do it if you like, but we're going to take a little bit of candle wax. Yeah, a little bit of candle wax. And we're just going to rub it on the sides of our sliders here. And this is nothing more than a little bit of lubrication so that it can slide easier in the slots that we have routed out. So we'll just give that a little bit of a coating, and then once you get that coated up with wax, just wipe off the excess here. Then we'll just slide this one into here, and we will give this one a little coating here. Let me get that glue bottle out of your way so you can see what's going on. And again, like I said, just a little bit of wax, coat each side. You don't have to do this. It's an optional step. And we will just clean up the edges, and this one will go in here. So now it's time to put our crank on here. And the crank just basically slides down over top of this. You're going to have to maneuver these pieces in order to line up the 1/8 dowel, and it just goes like that. Now, what you want to do at this point is we need to measure how much we need to go inside our little dowel retainers here, and we're going to use a flush cut saw with a setup block and shear off these 1/8 inch dowels so that we can glue on our retaining dowels. So at this point you should have something that looks like this, and you just want to make sure that your countersink is underneath here. In mine, I accidentally glued it with the countersink on top and had to break it apart, so something to pay attention to. But now we're going to turn a handle. Now you could just use a piece of dowel for this, that would get screwed onto here, but I think for that I'm going to actually get a scrap piece of maple and turn a little mini handle over at the lathe. And there we have our little handle, and what I've done is I've put a number 10 washer on the bottom of this, and we're just going to line it up with the hole in our countersink, and using a number 6 by 3/4 inch hole, or sorry, screw, we're just going to screw this in place up into our little handle that we've made here. Now you don't want to crank it down because it needs to spin, right? So you just want to have it just slightly loose, and that washer is going to help allow it to spin as well, just like that. And you know what, in retrospect, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that washer out of there because I think it's kind of pointless. I don't even know what I was thinking. I want this thing to be solid down on there. I might even use a little bit of glue for all I know. I mean, that little handle can just rotate in your hand. It doesn't have to spin. So there we go. I'm just going to make that tight on there just like that. And there is our handle for cranking our smoke grinder. Forget what I said about that number 10 washer. Get rid of that thing. We don't need that in this shop. The one last thing I want to do, and it's 100% optional because this is basically finished at this point, but I want to make a handle to hold it. And for that, we're just going to use a piece of dowel, and I'm probably going to spin it down a little bit just to shape it a bit on the lathe, and then we're going to screw it and glue it in place. I'll come back in a bit and I'll show you what I came up with, and then you can of course make your own handle if you wish to make one. Well, all I've done is turned a little handle out of some scrap poplar that I had, and we're just going to put a little bit of glue on here, and I've basically drilled and countersunk a hole right in the middle of our smoke eater there, or smoke grinder, and we're just gonna take that and screw this handle in. Now it's a little awkward here. I'm trying to do it so that you guys can see what's going on, but it's not cooperating with me, but we'll get it. We always do. Hopefully it's showing on camera here, I don't know. But anyway, we're gonna screw this in place, and then we're gonna wipe away all of that excess glue and the squeeze out that's on the bottom here. And then I'm gonna show you what to do with this thing. Now, there is what you should have. And how do you use this thing, you may ask? Well, you simply grab a hold of your handle and you turn it. Just like this. Smoke grinder. And there you have it. A smoke grinder. Now there may be some of you out there that may be asking, well, that's really neat, Kenny, and everything, but what does it do? Like, what's its purpose? What does it do? And you know what? I'm going to sum it up for you in one word. Nothing. It does absolutely nothing. It's just a cool little gizmo or a gadget that you could get your kids involved in making. Again, last week we had the project for the kids with that Jacob's Ladder project. This is just another little silly project and a way to make use up some scrap, and it's just a cool little conversation piece that you can make with your kids. Now it does have a practical use, and I know. Does it? How the heck can a smoke grinder have a practical use? Well, guys, you're gonna have to tune in next week to find out exactly what the practical use is for this. And I hope you've enjoyed making this silly little project, but I hope you're going to join me for the practical aspect of this next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.